I really did not want to make my first episode of my Better Health, Better Man video podcast on this subject. But after talking with my wife, I believe it's necessary. I'm going to read you a quote. And if you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. That is a quote from Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. And sadly, on September 10th, 2025, we saw just how true those words are with the political assassination of Charlie Kirk. This was not an act from a strong man. It was the act of a very weak man, a very weak, resentful, cowardly man filled with hatred, consumed with envy. However, we have to describe the difference between a strong man and weak man because, let's be honest, there are many in this society who want to blur those lines. Number one, strong men, they build. They shoulder responsibility. They start and lead families. They hold their faith steady. Charlie Kirk was all that. Strong men, they seek dialogue, even with people they disagree with. Strong men are capable of violence, but they do everything in their possible way to avoid it. Okay? However, weak men, the first thing a weak man wants to do is destroy. They lash out when they feel powerless. They let bitterness rule them. They mistake violence for strength. And if you take a look, there are a lot of weak men in our society today. They want to tear down the family. They want to tear down the family structure. They want to tear down society. They want you to capitulate and be forced into accepting their definitions of what it means to be a strong man or what it means to be a family. But violence is not strength. It never has, never will be. Violence is weakness that is unmasked. Political violence is even worse. However, we have to go back and let's talk about the poison of demonization. And that's exactly what we've been witnessing pretty actively since about 2007, 2008. I believe it goes farther back to the vice presidential debate between Jack Kemp and Al Gore, when Al Gore basically told Jack Kemp that all of his supporters are racist, but thank you for not being one. And Jack Kemp did not push back. But in 2007, 2008, we saw one particular political ideology ramp up the division and hatred and those words. How often since that time have we heard words thrown around as weapons? You're just like Hitler. You disagree with me? Must be because you're a racist. Oh, you're a bigot, aren't you? Fascist. I bet you support Gestapo-like tactics. These labels have always been used, and they are meant to strip away an individual's humanity. Labels are meant to justify the hatred that is consumed by one particular ideology. Weak men, they like to grab a hold of those labels. They use them as fuel. They use them to rationalize their resentment, to excuse cowardice, and to unleash the violence that they so enjoy. We saw this with the assassin's text messages to his furry trans lover. He used his hatred of Charlie Kirk as his justification, saying, you can't reason with people like that. They must be eliminated. We see that now. We've seen that in Congress the last 2 weeks. People saying that about Charlie Kirk. Calling him a racist. The beautiful thing is that Charlie and his organization, Turning Point USA, has everything on video. So everybody right now, all those people that are trying to justify their hatred and justify their demonization, are taking things out of context, and purposely so, because they know that if you go back and look at the full context of what he said, nothing what they say is true. Those are weak men and weak women doing that. Just remember, when words lose their meaning, violence becomes their substitute. Weak men are dangerous. They hide behind their ideology instead of standing on principle. They fail to govern their own lives. They seek to control by tearing others down. We saw this in spades. The man who pulled the trigger was not acting out of strength. He was acting out because he was a broken man mentally. He was broken. He went down the rabbit hole that is the internet and became radicalized with hatred. He was bitter. He was weak. And that weakness cost the life of Charlie Kirk, who was a husband, who was a father, who was a leader, and who was a man of faith. Now let's talk about Charlie Kirk, because when it comes to spiritual faith, I don't think there was anybody stronger. I'm a Gen Xer, okay? And I look back and I watch his videos and I'm just like, this man, a young man, was so strong in faith. He was strong where it mattered. I don't know about his accomplishments in the gym. I don't know about his metabolic health. But I do know, just by watching him, that man was strong where it mattered. He was a family man. He believed in respectful dialogue, even when the debates were heated. There was not one person who he would not sit down with and debate. He debated them not only to defend his faith in Western civilization, but he debated them because he was hoping that he could convince them that their ideas were wrong, that their ideas led down a path that was dangerous. He was anchored in his faith and not fueled by resentment. He didn't. You listen to him and you see his interviews. He's like, he didn't hate anybody. Okay, he hated ideas, but he never hated the individual. He showed us that strong men don't need violence to prove themselves. They prove themselves by how they live. Charlie Kirk lived a godly life as a father, as a husband, as a leader, as a CEO. He lived the life that men should strive for. He lived a strong spiritual life. And that example cannot be lost. So as a Gen Xer, I watched a lot of old movies that my parents grew up watching. And when I heard of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, there was one movie that came to mind. And if you haven't seen it, I implore you to see it. It stars Charlie Kirk. It stars another Kirk, Kirk Douglas. Came out in 1960. by the name of the movie was Spartacus. Spartacus was based on real life events during the Roman Empire. And in one of the last scenes, after the slaves and the gladiators have been captured and rounded up, a Roman general demands that the slaves give up their leader Spartacus in exchange for mercy. Well, one by one, the men stand and declare, I am Spartacus. They chose to carry his name, his mission, and the spirit in which they rebelled. Men, today, we are called to do the same thing. Charlie Kirk is gone, but we must rise and say, I am. We are Charlie Kirk. Not literally, but in spirit. By living as strong men, by leading our families, by standing firm in faith, and by refusing to let bitterness and cowardice consume us. That's how we honor him. That's how we fight back against the weakness. In closing, gentlemen, weak men are dangerous because they destroy. It's as plain as simple as that. Strong men are necessary in this world because they build. They defend. Our future, our families, our communities, and our nation are going to need all the strong men to stand up and fight the evil that is this demonization of our humanity, that is this demonization of our family, this demonization of our culture. This is not a race issue. This is not a gender issue. This is an ideology that wants to look at you as a man and tear you down. We have to stand up, men, and choose strength. That's what Charlie wants us to do. Amen.